Welcome to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. Good to see you all again. As you know, last week was a pre-recorded episode because I had a little trip that I took to my son's graduation and a little place called Catalina Island. Um, just so that you all know, you're listening to Through a Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. I highly recommend that you check Carl Casey out. He's got a lot of really, really good tunes, and he offers them, for free as long as you offer attribution to him. So, he has a really good sense of style. All right, so today I don't have a guest. And part of that is just to habituate people to this is not only going to be an interview only show, just because getting one person to, on the show each week is a nightmare. And it's also highly stressful because sometimes they don't show up. It's one thing when it's pre-recorded, but it's another when you are live. And for full disclosure, there was no one who was scheduled to be on for tonight. I was trying to get somebody else on. I was going kind of back and forth, but we hadn't finished it before everything was set up. So in this episode, I'm going to be very careful not to talk anything about the P word or the C word, because the fascists that are controlling the strings at social media companies do not allow you to talk about this stuff. Even though if you look at the data, there's some things that you can find. So I can't talk about it if you even mention it at all. I just don't want to get a strike on my personal channel for daring to have critical thoughts and to look at evidence and data and to draw my own conclusions. Heaven forbid. Trust science. Anyway. All right, so today I'm going to talk about some topics that hopefully are not sanctioned yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they start to get sanctioned a little bit later on. So I'm just going to get in some of this stuff while I still can, before we get closer to the most freest, most fairest election in history. Or that was the last one, but maybe this will be most freer, most fairer. I'm deliberately being ridiculous with my improper use of grammar, etc. But anyway, I'm sure we'll start to see some weird stuff, particularly regarding speech, the closer we get to the big day in November. So again, I'm going to try to avoid all that talk, in case they want to apply these rules retroactively, which I've heard they've done to people before. So, we'll see how it goes. So what I want to talk about is the current geopolitical situation. I kind of want to lay that out first as a primer in order to explain why we're not getting anything from the government on disclosure, UAP stuff, all that stuff. So thank you, Big Diesel. I appreciate you. Oh, wow. Yeah. It's getting ridiculous. The use of lawfare in particular. But again, this is not a partisan comment. It's just you ought to apply the letter of the law equally across all people, not just not bend it to target your political enemies. Like that's Banana Republic stuff. It's not a good trend. And if one party does it, the other party's going to retaliate. You can be certain of that. It's just the way it works. So let's not get stupid. But in terms of the current geopolitical situation, let's start with Ukraine right now. So, I did some very quick back of the envelope stuff. There's about 300,000 Russian troops in Ukraine. According to some sources, there are only 1,000 in Belarus. I just wanted to look it up. Earlier this year, there were between, I think, 10 to 15,000. But They have left. Now, Wagner was in there for a little bit. I don't know if they're still there. So, whether or not Russia is going to have a broader offensive in the summer, they are slowly inching forward. The issue right now is, according to the Congressional Research Service, which I just recently, looked at, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier right now is about 40 years old. So you have old men fighting this way. Look, I'm older than 40, but men older than 40 aren't supposed to be fighting as grunts in a war, right? They're supposed to be, if they're not kind of in the field grade leadership class, so you're talking, majors and above, they're, they have experience, they've lived lives. If the Ukrainians are tapping into that demographic right now, it means that they're running out of men. And you don't draft 40-year-old men unless you're kind of in a serious emergency. And that's not a knock on Ukraine. It's the situation is that dire. These sort of high intensity conflicts burn through people. This is not insurgency, counterinsurgency, where you're fighting an enemy that's hiding among the populace, which has its own particular horrors. This is, if you pop your head up, a drone's going to see you and you're going to die. So a lot of it is just kind of, what we used to affectionately call the infantry earth pigs, digging in, staying underground in little kind of alcoves and in trench works and things like that, and hoping that the drones don't find you. The other thing too is the Russians obviously are also running out of equipment. The problem is they've had a stockpile they've had 70 years to build up since the end of World War II, during the Cold War, maybe 70, 80 years, let's call it. So I know we all like to joke that you see these like T-62 tanks coming in from the front, which is not great, but the Ukrainians are pretty much running out of all the old Soviet supplies and ammunition that they had following the Cold War, and now they're almost relying almost exclusively on Western equipment, which we've been supplying. And I believe we've, at least according to the Congressional Research Service, have supplied about. Let me actually make sure that I say this correctly. And now, of course, I can't find it because that's just how things work. All right, so I want to get these numbers right. So I believe that there's, since the start of the war, the United States has committed more than $51 billion in security assistance to Ukraine. That doesn't mean there's not more money on the way, etc. Also, since 2022, the U.S. and allied nations have trained more than 123,000 Ukrainian soldiers. So again, quite a bit, but they are relying almost exclusively on on U.S. And allied materiel. So not great, and they're running out of men. In terms of artillery on both sides, I think the running average is about a 7-1 advantage in Russia's favor. And then in areas where there is a high activity, the Russians have about a 10-1 advantage. In terms of population, I think at the beginning of the war, the Russians had about a 3-1 advantage. Now it's around a 4-1 advantage because of all the people that have fled Ukraine, as well as casualties, and the sum total of the refugee outflows and combat losses. So this is not the situation's not looking good. Now the Russians, again, they're operating with old tanks and all that stuff, but they have old tanks. The Ukrainians have pretty much may have some, but they've been virtually exhausted. They're running low on ammunition, and they're hanging on by their fingernails. Now, there's been some murmurs that the French would kind of get involved. The U.S. authorized strikes across the border. Now, in a recent interview, I think Biden clarified that the press gave him a super hard time. Um, but the substance of what he said was, I think, a fair point, which is there are some restrictions. It's not like you can fire HIMARS at Moscow. Like that's a no go. You can't do that. But in the areas, in close proximity to be able to support the strike, or to support the war on Ukraine, they are authorized to use it, which I think is also unnecessarily provocative. In the last, since the Biden administration started, there's been about 8 million illegal or illegal immigrants that have streamed across the border. And I'm not going to call them undocumented, migrants. That's horseshit. Okay. They're here and they're here illegally. They cross the border. There's 8 million people. Now, most of them are probably, are fleeing worse environments and have good reason, but it is very easy for both the Russians and the Chinese to infiltrate the US right now. I mean, it's super easy. And you're already seeing signs of it. So, and I'm not saying this was the case, but when I went down to Southern California, we drove down on the way back, because, I took a side trip. My wife kind of came back up. There was a fire in close proximity to Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, which is, located in Northern California near Tracy, California. And there was apparently a controlled burn in a boundary area between two counties. Now, the controlled burn would have been communicated to folks. It could very easily have been a total accident. It could have been caused by incompetence, but it could also have been caused by sabotage. And that would have been a great time to do it because you have plausible deniability. There was a controlled burn. It's near a major target. So at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, there are, to my understanding, that's kind of where they're working on fusion research, but it's also where at some point, and it could still be today, there's a lot of nuclear weaponeers that work on designing nuclear designs and things like that. So it could be a complete coincidence, but it's pretty suspicious. Back in April, there have been a number of scantily, if at all, reported ammunition plant fires in the United States. In fact, in this past April, there was a fire at the Scranton Army ammunition plant in Pennsylvania on April 15th of this year. The fire occurred in the heat treat building. It was quickly extinguished and did not result in any injuries. However, the cause of the fire is still under investigation. Okay. Add to that, a week or two ago, in a suburb in the outskirts of the Fort Liberty, kind of used to be called Fort Bragg before it became woke, area, there was a colonel who was in special forces who observed two individuals, one individual with a telephoto lens operating outside of his house, taking pictures of his children. He confronted one of the men. A second man was positioned in a vehicle, maybe 0.2 miles away or something like that. But the colonel confronted this individual and ended up shooting him. It turns out these individuals were both Chechen, which is kind of interesting. The fact that they were targeting a special forces colonel, let's imagine, again, I don't know any more details than that the special forces colonel had some hand in training Ukrainian forces, and in doing so became known to the FSB or the SVR. And I find it highly unlikely that these Chechens weren't operating at the behest of the Russian government. I don't know that for sure, but we're only scratching the surface about what's going on. I believe that allowing the Ukrainians to target anywhere inside Russia is a willful and dangerous and reckless decision by our government. I don't think it's worth triggering a response. I think Putin is entitled to a response, especially after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which, still to this day, to my knowledge, no one has claimed credit for. I would be highly surprised if it wasn't us or the British, because I don't think anybody else had the means to do it. I think it's absurd and laughable that the Russians would do something like that. All they need to do is just turn it off if they wanted to play games with Germany. So right now, the people who are currently running our government are pretty reckless. The most astonishing thing that I saw happened is the Ukrainians targeted an early warning radar system in Russia, which is effectively their eyes and ears for a nuclear strike. So they took down one. The U.S. government, responsible people in the U.S. government, would immediately clamp down on that and say, if you do that again, your funding's done. But instead, our government, from just looking at from the outside, apparently did nothing. The Ukrainians subsequently targeted two more early radar warning systems and hitting another one. So that's 2 out of 3 that they destroyed. I don't know about you, but if the Russians had done something like us, that provocative, where they blinded us with our eyes and ears to a potential nuclear strike, we would be on high alert. We would be a high DEFCON level. So the recklessness that we've been handling this situation is highly concerning to me. And I'm not currently working in that field, but I was mentored by Dr. Ash Carter, who became, several years after he mentored me, when I was at the Kennedy School, he became Obama's Secretary of Defense, one of the smartest, if not the smartest person I've ever met. This is not how he would handle this situation at all. At all. This is some frightening stuff. There are no adults at the table right now. So, and look, Putin's not a good guy, but he's the only adult at the table, as far as I can see. This is some scary stuff. So, in light of this, we should expect something, some sort of, and there's lots of stuff that's happening in the background that seems to be some sort of retaliation, but none of it's super obvious. There's also apparently been some ammunition plant sabotage operations occurring in Europe, likely by the Russians, which totally makes sense, right? This is kind of more important to the Russians than it is to us. But at the same time, our border's wide open. And we're spending a ton of money overseas, but we're not protecting Americans at all. In fact, we are making a situation even worse. If the Russians decided to push past the Dnieper River, or the Dnieper River, whatever you want to call it, which I think is probably likely where they'll culminate before the election, because I think they will likely achieve some sort of a breakthrough, but I don't think they're going to go beyond that. They're not stupid. But if they chose to, the NATO alliance is not ready for it, at least from a conventional standpoint. And the reason is back in the late 80s, we used to have 300,000 U.S. soldiers in Europe, and now it is a small fraction of that. So the only way we would be able to sustain a conflict there is a military draft, full stop. The Air Force would be the key player, but I'm also hearing reports that the Russians have significantly advanced their electronic countermeasures, and some of our weapons are being nullified. I don't know if that's true. I don't know where it is. I don't know how accurate that is, and if there's other ways that we can kind of get around that, which I'm sure there are plenty. The other thing that has happened is there's been a whole revolution in drone warfare that we missed out on. I think the Navy's probably the Navy and the Air Force are probably the most advanced on this, but the Russians and the Ukrainians have learned how to use drone warfare to great effect in ground forces. I just, just talking about, folks that I know, um, the United States military doesn't even have like a drone unit, right? They might have like a few drones attached to a battalion here and there, but they're not thinking about, at least the US Army, I can't speak about the Marine Corps, is not thinking holistically about it. So in any confrontation that we face with the Russians, if we got into a conventional conflict, my prediction would be it would be akin to a Kasserine Pass, which is at the very beginning of our first battlefield confrontation with the German army in World War II in North Africa. It was it was a huge defeat for us, right? We had to learn a lesson there. And the issue here is this isn't like the Vietnam War where the left broadly protested and was not in favor of military action, whereas the right kind of sharply saluted and kind of walked into the slaughterhouse. You're going to have a situation where the current administration has pretty much lost much of the support of veterans in the country because after they came back and served and fought, they were immediately treated like domestic terrorists and people who were considered the gravest threat, labeled all sorts of things. So the net result of that is they have zero support from veterans and their children, which is why a big reason why recruiting is down. There are other reasons that recruiting is down. A lot of younger people are using a lot more pharmaceuticals for to balance their moods, things like that. There's a lot more obesity. There's drug use, all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, even with a false flag, which at this point, I after everything I've seen in 2020, you know, everything I've seen since then, I would not put that past these people. I just wouldn't. But the bottom line is they don't have the support of the population. So any major draft for a war in Russia will encounter significant resistance from both the right and left, in my opinion. Like I'm not donating my son to some war that I mean, maybe if he was to go south and defend the border, yeah, maybe. But this has gotten out of control. We should be at the table. We should be negotiating a ceasefire and just end this bloodshed. It is senseless. It is pointless. I agreed at the very beginning with opposing kind of the naked aggression of Putin, but we bear some responsibility for that. So, constantly pushing NATO toward the Russian near abroad over the last 30 years. When the Cold War was over and we still had this alliance that was founded to counter Russia. So there's a lot of stuff that just people are blindly following these modes of an international system that probably don't make as much sense anymore. Now, look, it's not to say Putin's a good guy. Putin's not a good guy. Putin is just operating with his, where his own interests are. And what we're doing is we're playing fast and loose here. Additionally, I think next week or the week after, the Russians are sending a flotilla to Cuba to celebrate the Cuban Missile Crisis or something like that. So there's lots of kind of escalatory behavior that is not productive right now. So I think Putin's game plan is to race to the Dnipro. I think he possesses the capability to do so, and I think he'll stop there and sue for peace. But I think he wants to do this as quickly as possible before the U.S. election is over so he can deal with an honest broker, which leads to the next thing. Uh, I half think there's going to be some national emergency where they cancel the election. I don't think that'll happen because I think if anybody is intelligent, they'll realize that it's not a good plan. That's not a good. It's just there's under no circumstance is that ever a good thing to do. So, and people will see right through it. It's just nobody seems to be campaigning right now. It's really surreal to me. It is really surreal. So no. Well, I shouldn't say that. In the permanent bureaucracy, there's plenty of intelligent people. In terms of the people who are in appointed positions, maybe Anthony Blinken, but that's about it. That's it. I think our Secretary of Defense is probably the worst one we've ever had. I think he just goes along to get along, and I don't think he adds any value. In fact, he disappeared for a week and nobody noticed. So our national security advisor probably greenlit the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which was reckless and stupid. And he's certainly intelligent. He was a Rhodes Scholar. But I guess a better question is anybody who's in an appointed position competent? And I would say, aside from Anthony Blinken, no. They're all intelligent, but that kind of gets you. That only gets you so far. Let me see. I'm just missing a bunch of comments. I'm gonna go through really quickly. Wow, it's a lot of stuff. Hello, Gray Al. Good to see you. Yeah, it's super scary that we're authorized firing missiles. Let's see. Where's Tiffany? Yeah, I don't think anybody wants World War III, but they're going to get it if they keep acting this way. Yeah, again, I keep reminding people we are in the fourth turning right now. This is the time that we reach the great crisis. The last fourth turning was World War II. And we're at a period of crisis. And usually after the crisis, I think Generation X is the generation that kind of gets us through it. And then, the millennials and Gen Z are the millennials are the ones that kind of are going to remake the world order, because that's what's happening right now. In fact, de-dollarization might be at hand. I think today is the day that there was supposed to be a security agreement that was either endorsed or not endorsed by the King of Saudi Arabia or by Mohammed. I can never remember his name. It's like MS. Mohammed bin Sultan, MBS, was either supposed to confirm but there was selling oil in dollars has been a huge source of stability in the global economic system. And if barrels of oil are not denominated in dollars, that has a whole set of second order effects that are frightening to contemplate. And this group of people are the architect of this, because, it's one thing to put sanctions on Russia, which are, good, fair, and operate within the international system. But when you start seizing assets that are denominated in dollars, you undermine the credibility of denominating your assets in dollars. So, of course, Russia and China immediately started shedding them and, reducing their exposure, which is not a good thing for the dollar internationally, and could presage more inflation for the United States going forward. So there's just these people aren't doing a good job. They're just not. They they're just not managing something that, it's very delicate, it's very complex. But if you're not looking at this stuff from multiple angles, other than Russia bad, right? You can screw up the international system, and that's basically kind of what they're doing. Yeah, it's always been a red line, NATO expansion to. I agree that he's smarter than everybody else involved, but he wasn't that smart, right? You know, his invasion was, at least the execution of the initial invasion was some of the greatest incompetence I've seen from a world power, in my living, my lifetime. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to get too much into theology, but yeah, the U.S. effectively has open borders right now. Um, Russia wants its land back, which, right or wrong, that's kind of what's happening. Um, China certainly wants Taiwan. It looks like we may have talked them off the brink, or it was just a staged exercise. But where I think we're out of the danger zone. I think on Coast to Coast, I said it was a 40% chance that they took Taiwan this year, and they didn't so far. The next window is in August. I think we're safe for a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't say the c word. Like, I don't think there's going to be a armed domestic unrest. I don't think that's in the cards, and I hope it's not in the cards. But what you'll see, though, is you'll see broad scale resistance, right? You can have peaceful resistance in the sense that, I'm not a big fan of blocking roads and stuff like that, but people burning draft cards and things like that, like they did in Vietnam, may be in the cards. Um, or people, but I don't want to talk about this stuff on YouTube too much. I just think there'll be peaceful resistance to all this stuff. I don't think they could credibly start shipping people to Russia. I mean, it just, what a waste. What a waste. It's just stupid. And I think this administration knows they can't get away with that. They just can't, especially since none of them, very few of them have served. So why should our children, right? It's just like heads they win, tails we lose. Not No, not anymore. Not anymore with people who, these people who are in power, right? They're, many of them are smart, but they're not competent, and they don't have, like, many of them don't have the life experience to understand what the consequences of their action. Many of them never shouldered a pack. Many of them never, had their feet bleeding from just, rucking for hours on end, and marching, and training, and kind of going through all that. It's just, we just have the wrong, like, and this is not a Republican or Democratic thing. I mean, the Republicans in the House just passed an anti-Semitism law. Look, anti-Semitism is bad. You shouldn't do that. But if you're working with an employee, and you use the word hag, and they start saying that's a 16th century word that is a anti-Semitic slur, right? Like, if that bill were to pass the Senate, you could be accused of committing a felony now. Like, when did we get to this insanity? I mean, literally, as soon as I heard that, uh, I used to be pretty pro Israel, but after I heard that, I'm like, Israel's now like getting involved in our domestic politics to the point where they're sanctioning our, American speech. Good luck in your war, because I'm no longer behind you, right? I'm not behind the Palestinians. I'm not behind Hamas. Like, just do what you're going to do to each other. I won't have nothing to do with it, because anybody who sanctions my speech is not a friend of mine. So anyway, I'm not going to get too much into that, but just there's a lot of things in the international order right now that are changing and that are breaking down. So, like I said, what happened on October 7th was horrific, and Hamas should be destroyed, but it's not our fight anymore. We've been fighting for Israel for the last 20 years, fighting their wars in Iraq, fighting their wars in the Middle East. Enough. Fight your own wars. Fight your own wars. Especially if you're going to sanction my speech after my generation fought them for you. Okay, let's see where we are. Yes, it's very frustrating. Yeah, I think there's going to be an election. I just can't. But every time I think that, like, you see this lawfare stuff, it's absurd. It's absolute insanity. The more I see this stuff, because the world doesn't seem to make sense anymore. And I almost want to say, and I'm not saying this, but I almost want to say there are forces greater than all this that are behind it. Forces that are unseen, forces that most of us are not aware of. Whether or not it's spiritual forces, whether or not it's, some ancient antediluvian civilization that lives underground, the former Atlanteans that are playing us like puppets, or extraterrestrial. I don't know, but it feels to me like there's something behind this. I'm not saying there is, because it sounds crazy, but all this stuff is just insane. It's just like the wrong people are in the wrong places at the absolute wrong time. It makes no sense. But yeah, Tiffany, when you say I feel like they are purposely destroying us, I don't think they are, but it certainly feels that way. Oh, no worries, Tessa Marie. Always good to see you. Well, I'm making. By the way, if you just joined us, man, I blew through like the first 50. No, it's not 40 minutes, but I blew through. I was worried I wasn't going to have enough material. I haven't even gotten to the second part. But anyway, if you're just joining us now, you're listening to Through Glass Darkly Radio on United Public Radio. We're covering kind of the current geopolitical landscape, and then I'm going to dovetail into how that may or may not affect UAPs and UAP disclosure. But we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I promise. I'm just trying to lay out kind of what's going on. Well, no, there's another C word too. You were correct if you're thinking about the other C word, but I don't even want to say that. I don't even want to say that word, because I'm sure it'll be like retroactively sanctioned at some point. By the way, there was like the massive like Palestinian protester insurrection this week, yesterday. I mean, they were like getting really close to the light. It was like, of course, none of those people will ever go to jail, or because it's just a protest. But it's interesting how they, the regime treats that. Totally fine. Totally fine. You support a terrorist group? Totally fine. Yeah, totally okay. Yeah. So Tiffany, again, very wise. You are very wise. I'm just going to read what Tiffany had to say. The problem is every time we think they won't do something because it's so obviously stupid, they end up crossing that line and doing exactly that. That's how I feel every single day. It's just like you can't possibly be thinking that that's a smart idea. What are you doing? Yeah, they're good that way. They're very adept at that. So you got to give credit where credit's due. I, I'm I'm not a religious man, Area 51, but I'm starting to believe that. I'm really starting to believe that. Whatever demonic means, right? It could be influenced by a foreign country. It could mean actual demons. It could mean non-human intelligences. In fact, I think it that could be a potential thing because these people just aren't behaving rationally. It's almost everything is just super reactive. It doesn't make any sense. So just going back to this, the international situation, like I said, I'm worried. I think we're running up $1 trillion of debt every 30 days, something like that. We've drawn down the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I think we're starting to build that back up a little bit. Now, I don't know about this case. I think I've been talking about how we're not really building kind of or rebuilding the manufacturing base. I just watched an interview with Peter Zion. I haven't been able to look at his statistics or vet it, but he claims that we've actually been reindustrializing at the fastest rate in history. So I think somebody's obviously noticed the problem. He said something to the effect he expects welders to, make more than college graduates will in the first 5 years of their, post college education, educations. So, but with that, the flip side of that comes with wage inflation, right? Which is good for welders, but not going to be good for prices and things like that. So we're going to be entering a very, very strange time. Also, the housing stock apparently is the lowest it's ever been. It's replaced by about 1%, where 1% is kind of destroyed a year. Either fires or just bulldozed and things like that. So there is a lot of pent up demand for building activity and things like that. So if we come out of this, um, I think there'll be a huge renaissance in activity and building and things like that. It's just the wrong people are in charge right now, and we're either going to change it the slow way or the fast way, and I pray it's the slow way. And that's through elections and things like that. But after seeing this bunch run, I don't have a lot of faith that there's not going to be some weird stuff that you see. I mean, we're already seeing this lawfare stuff, which is just, I mean, come on. I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be, we will get through it. We always do. U.S. history has been remarkably violent and tumultuous. I don't think we're going to see anything like we saw in 1860 to 1865, where you have like set piece battles and things like that on American soil. Um, I think it'll just be a little spicy, where people on the extremes of either side do things that they really shouldn't be doing. And if we just all keep our heads and you just speak out, do the right thing, speak up and do the right thing is even when no one is looking, I think is a good way to live our lives right now. Even if the other guy's cheating and I'm not talking about a specific presidential candidate. I'm just talking about bad people in general. Bad people are always going to cheat. Bad people are always going to lie. Bad people are always going to do bad things. But at the end of your life, if you don't want to live a life of guilt, a life of regret, just do the right thing, tell the truth, and you won't have any regrets. And you might not, end your life and as an an extremely rich man or woman, or you might. But the approach that I've taken to life, thus, in the first, call it 40, close to 50 years of my life, has always been intense planning and grinding and getting and just kind of forcing outcomes. And as I kind of become a little older and slower, dumber, I'm becoming a lot wiser. And what I've realized is sometimes you have to go with the flow and opportunities just start to come. Like I've started to experience that once I just kind of let go. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't work hard. It doesn't mean that you should stop dreaming and doing things. But sometimes if things aren't meant to be, they're not meant to be. And we all participate in a grand tapestry in our lives. And if you kind of look back on the paths that you've all traveled, many of you wouldn't have predicted where you are right now. There have been chance encounters. You've met people that have pushed you along in different ways. And sometimes your intuition is going to be superior to your intellect, right? So I think the Romans called it intuitus and intellectus were kind of the two modes of decision making. So, all right, let me. I'm not. Tiffany's getting a little spicy. I'm not. I'm not going to comment on politics because I don't want to alienate anybody. I'm just commenting. I just when I see it incompetence, I can't unsee it, and that's it. I'm just going to talk behaviors. I'm not going to talk people or parties or anything like that. When I see incompetence, I'm going to call it out. And man, is there a lot of incompetence? I'm gonna do my best Klaus Schwab accent. You will own nothing and be happy. You will eat the bugs and you will like them. It's scary stuff. Yeah. Yeah, that's also scary. Like BlackRock and others are buying an enormous number of homes. Like even where I am, I'm constantly getting emails like, "Hey, we'll buy your home in cash today," and it's like, why? No, like I spent my entire life not taking vacation, working extremely hard because I wanted to pay the darn thing off because I didn't want to have attachments to people. I didn't want other people to have leverage over me. But we're entering a world where there's kind of resistance by the powers that be to try to make that. Yeah, yeah. Although I don't know if they're doing it consciously, there's probably some force operating in the background that is kind of doing this. Yeah, I don't think Area 51. I don't think the powers that be are actively creating a communistic society. I think that many of them look. I've noticed a lot. I've worked in Silicon Valley and startup culture and things like that, and what I've noticed is that there's a fair bit more of luck than people are often more lucky than they are good. And what happens is sometimes a complete and utter moron will back their clown car into a gold mine and think they're a genius. And when you have one of those lucky successes, people will often ascribe that success to competence rather than what it may have been, which was luck. And by the time they lose successive investors more money and things like that, because they really never knew what they were doing, they still have great lives. They still get along. So I've learned to just kind of evaluate people regardless of their back. Look, if they have like really, really well pedigreed and things like that, I know they're going to be smart. I just don't know if they're going to be good. And the one thing that is most important to me is integrity. If someone's a liar, I don't care how smart you are, you just avoid those people entirely. Because why work with somebody like that? It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. All right, so that's kind of the landscape that we have in Europe right now. In the United States, we already talked about there's 8 million people who are floating around the United States. I think Biden just recently is going to put a cap on the number coming in, but apparently a prior Homeland Security director said that cap, a few years back, saying I think it was like 1,000 people per day would be an absolute unmitigated disaster. Well, apparently that cap is like 2.5 times that number. So it's not really solving the problem. It's just an election ploy 5 years before or 5 months before the election. So again, no shade on people trying to get to a better life and things like that. But there are people here who went through a tremendous amount of planning and hard work, the legal immigrants here who are furious. I know many of them. And they played by all the rules. They did all the right things. And it's just not it's not right. It's not fair. It undermines the authority of the system. And if you're selectively enforcing certain laws and not others, and then selectively enforcing certain laws against certain people, we're creating new laws that don't exist and targeting certain people. You're undermining the very fabric of your society. And that's kind of what's happening right now. So I would expect some weird, that's the other weird thing. There's other, like, lots of weird stuff. So a week or two ago, I heard like this loud aircraft noise. Like we live near an airfield. I'm not going to say the name of it, but it's not a traditionally military airfield, but it was like really loud. And I come to find out that there was a U-2 aircraft doing quick takeoffs and landings at this local airfield. Now, this is not like a big international airfield, just where kind of people can get on jets and things like that to get their destination quicker. But it's not like a major airport like SFO or Oakland or whatever. But it's a small airfield. But it's just, there's a lot of bizarre things that are happening like that. So for what it's worth, and additionally, like, they're cracking down on, so like, here's another example of incompetence. So Scott Ritter, okay? Scott Ritter is a Russian propagandist. I mean, but he makes good points sometimes. Okay, but he's clearly a Russian propagandist. So he goes, I don't know if it was several months ago or whatever, but he delivers a speech to a group of Chechens in Russia, right? He speaks to them in Russian, which is just, come on, dude. What are you doing? Okay, regardless of that, somebody like that, if they're going back to Russia to do something like that, just let them go. Just let them go. It's ridiculous. But they seized his passport and wouldn't let him go. All that conveys is that it's just a signal of weakness. The guy is harmless. He's harmless. In fact, he looks like a fool for doing that. But the moment that you seize his passport and sanction him, makes people like me go, wait, what's he doing? Maybe I should pay more attention to him. Because whatever he's doing is obviously a threat to something, this shouldn't be a threat. As a Russian propagandist, does that mean stuff he's saying is correct? That the powers that be here don't want people to know? I think I need to listen more carefully. So it's just things like that. They're just stupid. Like, just let it go. Same thing with Alex Jones. They're like seizing a studio. Why? The guy is like, he's not a threat. Why are you making him into a threat? It's just and all this stuff kind of happened in the same week. Like, why are you like cutting down on free speech? It just makes your hand look weaker and weaker and weaker. So I'm gonna have to drink my coffee because it's getting cold. But what do you all think? All right, so we have all that kind of going on in the background. We talked a little bit about China. China, I think, is on the verge of like a commercial real estate crisis. We're probably on the verge of a commercial real estate crisis, just albeit less. Let's see. Yeah, maybe this one world order thing. It's just not working. Yeah, I think ever since the advent of the internet, the powers that be were able to tightly control what the populace, what information the population received. There was a consensus on what everyone knew, and with the internet, that started breaking down, and it made these people, these power mongers, worried, and they should be worried because if they're running things and they're not making the right decisions, they should be replaced. Right? That's how our system's supposed to work. So that's kind of the broad environment that we find ourselves in as we kind of dovetail into the UAP topic. So yeah, I'm not going to mention that word or that event, but like to call something like that an insurrection where no one is armed is patently absurd. It's just on the face of it. And I think history will show that unless these kind of totalitarian forces that are bearing down on us in every direction have their way and they erase the history. Riots are always bad. People who committed violence in those riots should be treated that way. But there are people who weren't even present who have 22-year jail sentences. Like that's just it's unconscionable. It's just unconscionable. So like I said, I'm not gonna go into it too much because I don't want to be personally targeted because that's what some of these there was a federal organization that was spying on Catholics in church. Have you ever heard of a Catholic suicide bomber? I mean, like ever? What? Why? Why are you doing that? Where's the threat? Why are we wasting resources on domestic folks when we have Chinese police stations forming all around US cities, right? I'm sure the FBI is working on that. For sure, they're working on that. But maybe direct those resources there. Maybe direct those resources to the 8 million illegal immigrants that we have in our country that could pose a potential threat, particularly from state sponsors like Russia or China. Maybe focus on that instead of Catholics. I mean, as a Catholic myself, I find that extremely offensive. So the world is topsy-turvy, but you have your faith, you have your religion, you know what's right, you know what's wrong, and just I keep repeating this, but always do the right thing. Always do the right thing. And you may be persecuted, you may be sanctioned for it, but always speak the truth and always do the right thing. And in the end, everything will be okay. It might get dicey for a little bit, but treat your fellow man the way that you want to be treated. The golden rule. Treat everyone the same, even people who are frankly probably evil. Yeah, I think there's a lot of targets. I think there's a lot of targets that these people are having. At the end of the day, this is the people who have the power versus the people who don't. people who just want to live their lives, don't want to be controlled, don't want to be told what to do, just want to be left alone. And there's a certain type of psychopath that just has to get into everything, has to have some sense of like, oh, I get to tell. People are just having power trips. And those aren't the people that you want in charge. You want people who are in charge who want to serve. And frankly, watching how this lawfare situation has been developing, why would you ever want to be a politician? I mean, like the upside. I mean, the upside. Maybe you can insider trade legally in Congress, but if we had the right leaders, they would shut that down tomorrow. But nobody is. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's rather interesting. Why don't they have the votes for that? That's something they should have the votes for, because it's not right. Like it is patently wrong. But otherwise, if you go into the political sphere, you're opening yourself up to utter penury and bankruptcy, because these people will destroy you. They'll attack every mistake that you made. They'll pull every skeleton in your closet out. So qualified people don't want to even begin to subject themselves to that kind of nonsense. So it will be it'll be interesting. Yeah. Yeah, going after parents at school board meetings. Seriously, that happened. That happened in the United States of America, like a year or two ago. Going after parents exercising their constitutional duty of freedom of assembly. Were investigated. For what? For what? Unconscionable. Yeah, you see there was a case where there were Somali immigrants that were able to scam $250 million out of the U.S. government. 250 million, a quarter of $1 billion. I think part of it was these the loans that they had during 2020. I mean, I can't believe I can't even say any of these words. I mean, I'd probably be fine, but I don't even want to skirt. I don't even want to skirt on it. But if you have to like rigidly enforce things like that, why? That tells me there's something out there that's true that they don't want you to know. Either that or they're so fundamentally incompetent and so misunderstand human behavior that they shouldn't be in charge anyway. Yeah, language and events are about defining narratives. That's right. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think people see that, and I don't think it influences them at all. Right? If you have a candidate who is a quote unquote felon, I mean, it just to think people are that stupid and didn't watch what happened at that trial and how like they didn't even know what the crime was. You have to like the jury has to make a decision on the crime before we tell you what the crime is. I think there's a Yale University law professor that came out today and just said there are like multiple areas where that case was just a complete travesty and hack of the Constitution, right? Multiple constitutional problems with it for obvious reasons. Again, I'm not trying to defend Trump. Like I don't like the guy. I don't like um I think I mean, I grew up Biden was my senator, so I kind of like the man, but he's completely incompetent, right? Trump I kind of don't like the guy, but I like how he punches at the establishment. Like I appreciate that. So again, I'm not trying to I'm just looking at the facts about what's going on, and I don't like how the powers that be are weaponizing the legal system. I think we're at a point where you just have to try to avoid the legal system at all costs because you're not going to get a fair deal at all, unless you're wealthy and you can just outspend the other guy. Like that's what it's about now. And it's just, it saddens me that the country like I grew up in, I don't recognize it anymore. I just don't. And we're going to get through it. We're going to be fine. But there's a lot of evil. And that's the only word I can use. There's a lot of evil in the system right now. Pure, unadulterated evil. Yeah, I'm not touching that. My vote is always a vote against somebody. And again, I'm going to vote against the more incompetent party. Read into that what you will. But again, I don't want to alienate. Like people have their reasons for supporting different candidates and things like that. But I don't know how you want any more of this, what we're currently seeing. I can't in good conscience support any of that. I don't think the alternative's great, but it's kind of better than what we have. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. They have. They have. It is cognitive warfare, is what it is. So for people who are listening to the radio, the comment that I'm getting here is the powers that be. Well, yeah, I'm paraphrasing. The powers that be have successfully made you self-censor your channel. That's right. That's 100%. And the way I look at it is a strategic decision. I can tactically make a decision that I'm just going to come out right out and say everything that's on my mind. But strategically, that would be extremely stupid because I would lose my channel and then I wouldn't influence anybody. But if I'm careful and I speak with logic and reason, I don't put out stuff that's not true or that I don't believe to be true because God knows it's very difficult to figure out what's true nowadays, then I can reach more people and I can make a difference. But I think it's very important that to eschew violence at any and all steps, avoid it, avoid places where it's happening. Because if you're on the wrong side of this, these people will destroy your lives, even if you didn't do anything wrong, even if you just defended yourself. Like there was a U.S. Army soldier who probably had his life destroyed did prison time for 3 years because some Antifa protester pointed an AK-7 at him at his car, and the guy shot him, killed him, defended himself. And the Texas governor, after this guy probably went through hell, probably exhausted all his life savings defending himself, went to prison anyway because he had some DA that went after him. And at the end of the day, he was pardoned, but he's kind of been out of the system. He probably spent 2 years kind of defending himself, 3 years in prison. How's he going to find a job? Who's going to hire him? He's in the military at the time. Does he have a dishonorable discharge? His life was ruined because of this twisted legal system. So avoid conflict when you can, protect your families, treat everyone with respect. Somebody that tries to argue with you, just walk away. And look, I had my brushes during 2020 where I wanted to do some things to like a particular individual who, was out on a hike and minding my own business. And I'm not going to go any further. I'm going to get myself in trouble. But there are people out there who have experience in these matters, and you don't want to brush with them at all. You just want to kind of mind your own business and do the right thing at all times. Yeah, but that's what it does, though. So I'm going to read what Area 51 says. The psychological indoctrination runs deep. If you're awoken, if you've awoken and go against the system, you're penalized and or terrorized silently. Yeah, you have to. Something like that happened in my last role, and it changed me forever. Like I mean, if I mean, I've said this many times. Like, I am not a proponent of DEI. It to me, it means didn't earn it, and we're seeing it now. We're seeing the I have nothing against finding qualified people of all walks of life to get into certain roles, but when you mandate it, you start to elevate, and you're working in a corporation. You're going to fill those slots, right? Regardless of quality. So what's happening is we're elevating some people who aren't ready for some of these positions. And as a result, you're starting to see planes fall out of the sky. You're starting to see a broad level of incompetence across all sectors of the U.S. economy. And unfortunately, we're going to see this for a little bit longer, but the tide is starting to turn. Uh, but it's not right. It's not right. And again, I'm not going to go into it too much, but I'm certainly going to speak out against it because things like that have impacted me personally in my life in the past. And it's wrong. It creates a ton of resentment. It fuels racism. It does all sorts of things and that are not good for people. And I'm a proponent of judging each individual by their own individual talents and character. And that's it. I don't care. I don't care who you are, where you're from. I just care, can you get the job done? And you either can or you can't. And if you can't, you're gone. It's as simple as that with me. Yeah, it's better for the powers that be. Bruno is saying self-censorship is better than censorship as there is an illusion of freedom, but better for whom? Better for the powers that be, right? But people are starting to speak up, though, and the more people that speak up, the because what's happening is you have a lot of sheep, and people are afraid to come out and say things, and because of that, the extreme drives the agenda, and they just keep asking for more and more. And when you at the very beginning, remember what they said about the lab leak thesis, right? If you even suggested that at the beginning, it was, what are you, like, shut up, bigot? Are you like racist, Chinese racist, anti-Chinese? Like, they would do things like that. And now they've done it so much and to such an extent, it doesn't mean anything anymore. It just doesn't. I looked at the evidence and it's pretty clear what happened. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but it's just an example of kind of the neuro linguistic programming that these powers that be are doing, uh, and it's starting to break down. They're starting to they're losing their grip right now, as they should, because they don't deserve to be running things. They're not competent. Yeah, people's feelings now mean more than quality anything. Right? They don't mean anything to me. It's binary. You either did your job or you don't. Fuck your feelings. Right? So, and again, you want to be polite to people. You always want to do the right thing. But if you say the wrong, like, I don't care what your pronouns are, right? Like, if you want me to call you a certain thing, I'll be respectful and call you a certain thing. But if you're going to cost me for making a mistake, fuck you. I got to watch with the language because apparently I'm allowed to talk that way, but I got to keep it. I got to keep it a little bit. Yeah, that's probably right. In the near future, you'll have to pay extra, subscribe to fly in a plane that is safe and regulated to a higher standard. Yeah, thank God for X. Thank God for Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Um, because until Elon Musk took over, they were actually doing things that were hugely anti-free speech. And they had very close ties with governmental organizations, right? Uh, which there's some level of that's probably required, right? You don't want Russian infiltrators or Chinese infiltrators messing with your social media, but still, it was pretty bad. I mean, when you report a factual story as a major newspaper like the New York Post did, to deplatform the New York Post, a major newspaper, for publishing a factual story, like a story that today nobody disagrees with the facts on. But back then, a bunch of former intelligence officials lied, literally lied to the American people, and said, "Oh yeah, it's a Russian hoax. This laptop, it's a Russian." They lied, and nobody disputes that today. And people like Brennan haven't apologized. So, and they were asked directly, "Would you like to apologize for that?" No, no, because to them, undermining the very fabric of a democracy is worth the price of getting rid of one particular candidate. That's not how it works, people. I don't care how odious somebody may be. You're only going to make them more popular by doing that. And that's all that's happening right now. So sunlight is always the best disinfectant. Let people compete on the quality of their ideas. And if they have worse ideas, they won't win out. But when you just drive the other side's ideas underground, you're going to inspire people to follow them. And in some cases, they could be important ideas, but because they haven't been exposed to the light of day, you're going to just make them more popular. Not only that, if you're running a law enforcement organization or an intelligence gathering organization, by deplatforming people, you're not going to be able to surveil them as well because they're not going to be public, and you're going to lose a lot of situational awareness. None of any of this makes sense. Like, you want those people online so you can detect future threats if they become that way. But this whole cancel culture nonsense is just undermining that. It just doesn't make any sense. And again, it creates extreme resentment. And that's fueling the popularity of the former President Trump. It's fueling the popularity. So, you're seeing, anyway, again, I don't want to get too much. We got to talk about UAPs. So we're in this kind of cauldron of instability. And if you're a responsible government leader, which none of the appointed or elected officials really are, but there are people who've been in the permanent bureaucracy for a very long time. They all realize this. So I don't think we're going to get anything this year, particularly with the presidential election, because there's already too much instability in the system, and that's just yet one more thing to kind of unnerve people, let's say. And we're talking about not people who follow this topic, but people who aren't even aware that Grush testified before Congress and noted that we had a crash retrieval program and a recovered craft, NHI craft and bodies and all that stuff. Like, he said that under oath in front of Congress on July 25th, 2023, almost a year ago, maybe 11 months or so ago. He said that under oath. Like, that is a reality. But most of the American population has no idea. Now, could he be lying? Sure, but under oath, on the record, to Congress? I think he believes what he says. I think he's genuine. And I think this stuff has been, out for a while. Yeah, to me, the Republicans are like the Washington Generals, right? Like, the Democrats are like the Harlem Globetrotters, and the Republicans are like the loyal opposition. right? They're just there to like, look stupid and uh, they're supposed to be all about balanced budgets and things like that. But every time they get into power, they spend more, just like the Democrats do. It's just it's one bird with two wings. That's it. It's a uniparty. Like these people are just they're not there for us. They're there for personal enrichment, with some exceptions. Like Burchett is the only one I can think of off the top of my head. Congressman Burchett. Yeah, we never will get answers, right? There are some prominent officials in 2020 who should be held accountable, but they never will. I'm not going to mention their names. All know who I'm talking about, right? Officials who funded organizations, who funded other organizations, who funded the development of awful things that leaked. No one's ever going to be held accountable for that, and that's why our system's broken. Full stop. Full stop. So I don't think we're going to get anything from our government now. NHIs, they too have a vote. The question, though, is they could have revealed themselves at any time in history. Why haven't they? Why haven't they come out? So I think part of this is going to be intensely personal for people. I think many people are seeing signs, many people are looking inward. And with me, it's been very plausibly deniable. Weird stuff happens. We talked about animal science and stuff like that. I'll give you. So I've been seeing ravens a lot, and ravens are associated with an experiment I tried to run. And I'll get into more of this in my live stream on the channel later this week. But I saw they were showing up all over the place this past week, and I think they're for a reason. But I'll give you a quick story. So I was in the airport. I had to drop off a rental car. I was trying to find my wife. I couldn't find her. I had her on my, find my iPhone, but it doesn't update fast enough to know if you're walking in the right direction, stuff like that. So I was kind of lost. And this raven flies up to a post, squawks at me very visibly, and then flies in a direction. So I'm like, okay. So I went in that direction. I walked up the raven like landed on a telephone pole or something like that and was waiting for me. And then I made a left and I just stayed there. And, kind of like, what are you doing, you idiot? So of course after walking for a little bit, I quickly figured out I was going in the wrong direction. So I did a 180 and started walking back. As soon as it saw me, it flew in the right direction. And I just followed that direction and it led me right to my wife's car. So was that a coincidence? Sure. Could totally be a coincidence. But there was something about it that was different. There's a whole piece of reality that none of us understand. And I think this is a time in history where there's going to be a great revival in this sort of stuff. Religion, spiritualism, whatever you want to call it. And we'll see. But just listen more carefully to that intuition that you have inside you. Listen more carefully. If you're religious, pray. And just try to treat your fellow brother and sister as you want to be treated. And we'll all get through this. We'll all get through this. And then, when you exit this mortal coil, maybe we'll find out what it's all about. I hope to find out what it's all about before that happens. but I don't think that's part of the program. I think we get to find out partly what it's about and not partly what it's about. So the UAP, all right, so Bruno is saying the UFO UAP issue is a career reputation ender in polite company. So the intent of not to give it credence. I don't give, like, I will, like, if somebody talks about it, I will tell them. I just tell them about Grush. Like, look, this guy testified in front of Congress. Look it up. Don't trust what I'm saying. Just listen to what he said. There's something to this. I don't know if they're aliens. I don't know if they're from parallel dimensions. I don't know if they're demons and angels. I don't know. I don't pretend to know. But there's something that we don't understand. You could talk about the double slit experiment, whereas if you're observing the electron, it only hits in one spot. Whereas if you're not observing it, there's a fringe pattern of probabilities. So we definitely live in a participative universe where consciousness to some degree dictates what reality we see and experience and understand. There's precognition, there's remote viewing, there's entities that we can't see that surround us. This stuff is out there. Again, I don't pretend to know what it is. I don't pretend to have any ability in accessing any of it, but it's real. It's definitely real. I just wish we were more open about it. We could make people's lives, I think, a lot richer and a lot simpler. Maybe it's not simpler. Maybe it gets a little bit more complicated. But humanity needs to make that step. It should not be kind of segmented into 50 people in the United States. What gives them the right to know these secrets and no one else? And just the sheer arrogance of that is insufferable. Yeah, I think Tucker interviewed him. I probably need to see that. I did see that clip about how everybody has an APEC guy except him. That was a little disturbing. Basically, everyone has an Israeli agent that they can call at any time. Is basically what that. I mean, just more of the same. He could be a plant. He absolutely could be. But if he did, he lied before Congress. I don't know if you would do that. But in a plant for what? The only, like, what would be the goal for Grush to be a plant? What would he hope to achieve, other than to scare the crap out of the Russians and Chinese that we have advanced? That's the only reason I can think of that the government would do that. Otherwise, there's no reason, and they can do that more effectively than putting someone's reputation at risk and risking prison time than that. Yeah. So another comment that's come in is, it seems like the closer one gets to UAP secrecy, the more prestige one has. That can't be a coincidence. As if UAPs are at the top of human society in secrecy. That's possible. That's possible. Yeah, but Justin asks, misinformation for what though? Other than the whole Chinese thing, like, it doesn't. Why you wouldn't just do that to do that, right? You would have a whole operation with a desired end state and all that stuff. Like, these people just don't do random things to do random things. Yeah, they could be demonic entities for sure, and they could be angelic entities, or both. It could be a mixture of both. Yeah, that's what scares me a little bit. Like the Rothschilds, things like that. The richest families on earth call the shots, and it's not frontmen like Musk, Gates, or Buffett. Yeah, it's possible. If true, that's pretty disturbing, because those people are not good people. They're just not. Not the people you mentioned, but these wealthy families. Oh yeah, they certainly know. Yeah. Okay, I agree with you 100%, Justin. Of course they know a lot more. They know a lot more. Now, whether or not you know, it's anything satisfying, I think there's still plenty of mystery that even they don't know. Otherwise, I think it's more likely they would tell us something, right? That could be a barrier. Yeah, so John Smith is saying advanced technology is being hidden that was probably reverse engineered from alien craft. The tech would be life changing if allowed into the civilian market. Sure. But I think it's probably more complicated than that. It could be that the disruptions caused by introduction of that technology wholesale could cause all, it could have a tremendous number of ripple effects that are difficult to predict, like a random walk, like the drunkard's walk or whatever it's called, right? You can't predict a priori what's going to happen if that genie is unleashed. So maybe they're slowly seeding it. Maybe, I don't know, right? But I don't think that's a good excuse. I'd rather just have this stuff out in the open. Look, we have this, this, and this. We're taking our time to release it. We're going to, in order to manage a transition, we're going to sell some of these technologies to oil companies so they don't collapse, and have like tens of thousands of people out of work. There's going to be a transition, and companies can bid on this stuff. Yeah, so Tiffany, I don't think it's that. I think with 0 point energy, there's a flip side to that, right? If there's energy in the vacuum that you could exploit, you could also exploit energy in the vacuum to create planetary weapons that could destroy Earth, right? So I think it's like trade-offs like that, where by unleashing some of this technology, you also are hoping that some terrorist doesn't decide to end humanity. So I think there's trade-offs like that they probably are considering. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, so Roger Claiborne said, I've done experiments on manifesting aliens and UFOs, and they begin to show up everywhere in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Anybody do rituals to summon them? So Gulf Breeze, Florida actually has a huge history of sightings in that particular area. So, that might just be a place where they operate. It would be worse than making the atomic bomb. Imagine something, again, I'm making this up, I'm not a physicist, the size of a thumbtack that could destroy Earth or wipe out the solar system. Like that's the kind of energy you're playing with. Interesting. Yeah, I think I've tried that whole CE5 protocol 3 times. I never really got it. I was never successful at it. Other than I tried it, I did it on the outskirts of Skinwalker Ranch too. And the worst that I got is, either my own thoughts or a thought projected to me that the shadow people were real, and then a chair blown into a fire at me. That's about the extent, and that could all be random and completely explainable. You could explain it away. Yeah, Gulf Breeze is a hot spot. It's definitely a hot spot. Just do some like after this show, definitely take a look at it. But there's a guy on Twitter. His name is Richard Geldrich, and he talks about Gulf Breeze all the time. Like it is there's a huge history of sightings and the lore in that particular area. All right, so I think we're going to be left with kind of nothing to show for disclosure unless we get into some cataclysmic confrontation with Russia and China, or Russia or China. Then I think, or if Russia decides to start testing nuclear weapons again, open air testing, then we might see stuff. So Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to put that down there just so that you can see it. So if you're enjoying this and you aren't subscribed, uh, I figure we're almost 2 hours in. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. I appreciate you. And it's just that I'm not growing like I used to. It's I should be at 10,000 by now. I should easily be at 10,000 by now. But it's just like I had one big growth spurt and then it just stopped. So just slow grind, slow grind. So any support from that standpoint, I would appreciate it. Anyway, without going too much into that. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. I think we're slowly muddying through. Carl Nell had his, without a doubt, these things are real, but interesting. So Roger Claiborne is saying he lived in Gulf Breeze when it all began. Rumor was one crashed into the bay and was recovered. Yeah, I don't know where to start with it. Oh, here's another one. I missed that. Pensacola. That makes sense. I want to say Pensacola. I think there's like it's where pilots train. I think there's like a nuclear power school. The Navy's nuclear power school is near there. So anything nuclear, they're going to be all over, right? There's a high correlation. A shrimper got it in his net and the Navy ship came and got it. Oh my Lord. I hope they paid him and didn't threaten him. Yeah. So in terms of, and I think like reports of abductions and things like that have all kind of come down across the board. So I don't know what's going on. Although like the Catholic Church is reporting more and more exorcisms to the point where they've had to start training people in the United States, whereas they only used to have to do it in Rome. You saw that whole episode. There's 2 episodes I did with Jerry Merzinski. He was a psychoanalyst, worked with schizophrenics, paranoid schizophrenics. We're still primitive in many ways. And I think through scientific inquiry, but also other ways of study and understanding, I think we need to take this stuff a lot more seriously. And I think there's been a concerted effort from the powers that be to kind of stifle it a little bit. I don't quite know why. I think that's the biggest mystery. Oh, yeah. Somebody's saying, did you know Dr. Sean Patrick worked for the CIA starting in 2005? I mean, no, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, Arrow is a counterintelligence operation. There's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind, right? The whole purpose of that is not disclosure. It's to entrap people who are leakers and who are trying to or potentially disclosing current programs and things like that. That's why they make people sign an NDA and stuff like that when they tell their story, right? Because they got you. So I'm not one of those people who gets upset by Kirkpatrick. He's just doing his job. It's whoever's in the background and directing that these sort of operations happen is the person that I have a bone to pick with, right? Because it's all about power. They're not protecting us by keeping people ignorant and in the dark. They're just not. It's not honest. It's not good. It's not wholesome for the country, and it's outside the constitutional authority, right? It's extra constitutional. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, so John Smith is writing, I believe loss of time is actually abduction, and I have firsthand experiences, but I cannot prove it. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had any, to my knowledge, lost time, except once in college when I was blackout drunk. But I I blame that on the alcohol. Oh, I don't know if Egypt's gonna jump in with Israel. I think he's saying Egypt's gonna shut the Suez Canal, uh, and kind of work with Iran and Russia and potentially China. But yeah, I need to reach out. I think he's on vacation right now. He sent me a bunch of vacation photos, so he's enjoying the sweet life right now. But there is something that I have cooking with both him and Daz Smith and a bunch of remote viewers. But I'm not gonna. Um, that's all I'm gonna say. That'll be a really interesting one. In fact, I need to reach out to Daz Smith and see how it's going. But I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, military bases do start cover rumors a lot. Oh, no worries, Tiffany. It's not no shame in that at all. You gave me something to talk about, so I appreciate that. Right. So I'm surprised I was able to talk about what I was able to talk about right now because I got back from a very long trip on a Friday, and and now I'm just getting back. So everything's still a bunch of stuff that broke. Oh, I bought this like night vision equipment, like cheapy Chinese night vision equipment, or that for like $110. Total piece of crap. It just I need to leave a review on Amazon. Like 1 star. Like literally, it was fully charged. I got to Catalina Island, and the battery was completely drained. Complete garbage. Complete garbage. So I had to toss it too because the wire like melted to it, or it's just garbage. So, but I kind of knew when I only spent $100 on this thing that it wouldn't last, and it lasted less than a week. Pure garbage. I just have to see if I can extract the video that I did capture. I have, in fact, the Joe Montaldo used to be able to do that because he used to do this. Who owns the network used to be able to do that with Skype, but StreamYard doesn't really have that capability. Well, I guess I could do it if I let people in on the sent links out to people who wanted to comment where they could come on, but you're rolling the dice there too, right? If they say something that triggers YouTube's algorithm, you're screwed. Like you're done. So yeah, I've definitely thought about it. But you can't do it with like phone calls with StreamYard. They don't have the capability, but you can have somebody log on and appear if they have the link. Like I can invite a guest to come on and speak, or multiple guests. I think I'd have like up to 10 people or something like that at once. So, maybe I could do something like that. But we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, that is a really good idea, John. All right. So I keep saying this, but I don't think we're going to see anything. It'll be interesting to see if we see anything from the NHI though. That is what'll be interesting. We just have to get through. Yeah, I know. It has not been kind to me. I see a lot of channels, and I'm not going to mention them specifically because I don't. That would not be professional for me to talk poorly about channels. But there's some really low quality channels that I've seen start after this channel and surpass me. And I mean, these people couldn't carry on an intelligent conversation with a penguin. I mean, like, but it is what it is. I'm not trying to be, negative or anything. It's just, it's frustrating, right? I see like shoddy thumbnails, really unintelligent takes on certain things. And, they just, the algorithm just pushes them along. And it could be that, they're, whatever it is, they're doing something right. They're doing something that the algorithm likes. Whatever I'm doing, maybe I cover maybe I'm not just narrowly focused on UAPs. That's probably part of it. But I think the more we learn about the phenomenon, we're going to understand that it's not that narrowly defined. So yeah. I'm just, like I said, I just try to avoid those topics altogether, or I just dance around them. And I try not to say any words that an AI will pick up. Right. So, and I think the episode 17, which you can find on Patreon, when I say episode 13, 17 of Through a Glass Darkly Radio, you can, if you join as just a member, which costs nothing, on my Patreon account, you can watch that whole episode and find out because YouTube booted it off, because I look, I think that's part of it. And not to toot my own horn, but there are people that I've spoken to who you'll never see on YouTube, but they'll be like professors at. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a professor at the University of Chicago who kind of covers this space, but doesn't appear on interviews. And I had a chance to speak with him. He's really, I had a really, really positive discussion with him. And people like that watch this channel, like really people who are way more educated than I am. Right? I didn't get a PhD. In fact, when I asked Dr. Carter if I should get a PhD, and he just told me, you'd be wasting your time. You have what you need. You don't need to. So, but I kind of always wanted to do that. And it's probably too late in life for me to go through the bother, but I'm hoping my son kind of has the financial resources to do that. Because look, I'm the son of two teachers. My dad was a math teacher. My mother was an elementary school teacher. And when I got into Stanford, I scared the crap out of them. Like, my dad was pissed, right? Like, most, and not to throw shit on my dad, he was just scared to death because he couldn't afford it. He couldn't afford to put me through it. And I said, don't worry. Like, the Army is going to pay for 80% of it. I have a few other scholarships that, from with the state and the federal government, that, the only help I'll need is for room and board. I got the rest of it. And that's kind of how someone like me was able to afford Stanford. So, but I think that's part of the problem. Like, a lot of people, and but as a result, like, I had to focus on every step of the way. When I got out of the Army, when I went to business school, I took out big loans. So I had to take jobs that allowed me to pay off that debt as soon as possible. And I did, thank God. And I don't want my son to have to do the same thing. I want him to be able to follow a path that makes him happy. And, or, not just my son, but my children, but particularly my oldest son, because he has the mental capacity to go and get a PhD in like a hard science or, highly technical field. Smart kid. So, anyway, part of the problem though is IQ is on a normal distribution, and the more complex and the more nuanced the topics that you cover and the way you approach problems, you're going to cut off, people below at least one standard deviation, and that's where most of the people are. That's 67% of the people, something like that, right? Are plus or minus a standard deviation of the mean being 100 IQ. So I'm only capturing, call it 15%, because I'm not getting the bottom half either, right? I might only be capturing 15% of the population. So part of it's just I'm not dumbing things down enough. Or maybe I'm not. Like, I'm not trying. It sounds like I'm being arrogant here, but I'm just responding to one of the comments. Yeah, I mean, being a jerk kind of helps in the short run. In the long run, it doesn't. Yeah, maybe. Well, it depends on what you get your degree in. If you get your degree in something useful, it was certainly worth it for me. I got a degree in something useful, and also a degree in something I was interested in. Right, so I did electrical engineering and I also did history, and I think they both complemented each other well, particularly in covering this sort of topic. Yeah, I mean, I was able to retain my point of view. It actually made me, I think, more thoughtful in how I engage on different topics. Because I understand, all the best arguments that each political side has, but particularly the left. I understand, the best arguments they have because I was exposed to more of it than I was, on the right per se. Because most professors, at least in the humanities, are going to be left of center because it just unfortunately is that way. I mean, I would hope that we'd have kind of a broader ideological range, but when academic institutions speak of diversity, they're diverse on everything but that, but ideological diversity. Yep. To the victors go the spoils. History is written by the victors. That's right. Area 51. Well, I kind of went. I want a nation of thinkers and doers, not workers. Workers are AI. AI is going to replace that at some point. All right. So to sum it up, I don't think we're going to get anything this year. I think we're just going to continue to get dribbles unless the NHI decides to vote, which they probably won't, as they haven't, unless we're about to destroy ourselves. In which case, depending on their motivation, maybe that's what they want. Maybe it's not what they want. Hard to tell. And some of us just never see the stuff. So I still don't know if it's real because I've never had an unambiguous experience that would indicate one way or the other. The best I could do was the iTV, the Apple TV unplugged thing. That was weird. But that's the weirdest it's gotten. And I don't know how to explain it, but I have no idea what phenomenon would have caused something like that. Where I leave the room and I come back and it's unplugged. Yeah, I don't think we live remotely in a far world, Curious. I mean, like, I think we live in kind of a totalitarian world, but I wouldn't call it far right. I think it's closer to left of center than anything else. Back when I was growing up, it was the right that wanted to censor speech, and now it's almost exclusively the left. Although the right does, from time to time, ban books from schools and things like that, which also is not great. It's not good. Interesting. So Roger Claiborne is reporting in Gulf Breeze, I saw a bright light outside my house, and when I went out to investigate, it left before I saw it. But neighbor ran up and said it was UFO. Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. I think you have to go to certain places. But like I was just in Catalina and I didn't see anything. I saw nothing. There is a place on Catalina Island though where people it's like in the southwest corner, the highest part called Black Diamond, and we asked a bunch of locals, and they said like that's a place that gets really eerie at night there, whatever that means. And there were locals who did report sightings. So there's something to it, but when I was there, I didn't see anything. Yeah, it's probably not a coincidence. I mean, that's what Steve Mera will tell you about. So Roger Claiborne is writing earlier that day. I did a summoning ritual talking about coincidence. Mera will tell you that's kind of the quick way to establish communications with NHI. It's also the most dangerous way. Mm. So someone else is asking, will Elizondo's book push us closer? Is there any info on his post-publish action items? He's got a website now and seems to be gearing up for something bigger. Maybe. I would love to interview him. I just don't, he's going to be on the press junket in bigger places than Through a Glass Darkly with the my 8.8K subscribers. Although I reach a lot more people on the radio through United Public Radio here. So between 300 to 1.4 million actually across all platforms, including YouTube, radio, all that stuff. So yeah, I would love to interview him. Yeah, Bruno, very wise words from Bruno. He says, I think times like this are a test of character. We will come out stronger. I think we're all in this place in history for a reason, for a good reason. And, it could be a test, it could be a simulation or whatever, but we're in the right place in history and we all have our roles and we either pass the test or fail it. But we may be the judge of whether or not we pass it or fail it, or something else might be. I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it unless we're around somebody who knows what they're doing, like Steve Mera. I wouldn't just do it. Yeah, some people might be monitored, but don't know why or don't know what. All right, folks. I think we are at the end of our scheduled programming. So it was an absolute pleasure, as always. Thank you for sticking with me. If you've enjoyed tonight's festivities, click like, subscribe, and you'll be notified every time something comes out. So I appreciate you. And yeah, Garius, wise words as well. We're facing a new world. Absolutely. Thank you, Bruno. I'll see you all on the flip side. I'll see you later this week. I have my monthly live stream on my regular YouTube programming. So thanks, everyone. And see you all soon.